Lieutenant Daniel Reed clutched the control yoke as the research vessel shuddered violently around him. Warning klaxons blared through the cabin while red emergency lights cast eerie shadows across the instrument panels. Mayday, Mayday. This is UNSC Exploration Vessel Horizon. We've encountered gravitational anomalies and are going down on uncharted planet XC-2971. Coordinates follow. Static swallowed his transmission as another violent tremor tore through the ship. The navigation officer lay unconscious beside him, a gash across her forehead. The rest of the crew had already reached the escape pods, but someone needed to stay behind to pilot the main vessel away from their trajectory, directly toward what sensors indicated was a densely populated region. Daniel gritted his teeth. Computer, divert all remaining power to thrusters and shields. Warning, atmospheric entry in 15 seconds. Hull integrity at 37%. The view screen showed a landscape rushing toward him, purple-hued forests and glittering blue lakes under twin moons. Beautiful, if he weren't about to die on it. The ship hit atmosphere, and the world outside became fire. Daniel closed his eyes, said a silent prayer, and pulled back on the controls with every ounce of strength he possessed. He awoke to the taste of blood and the smell of burning circuitry. Sunlight, orange and heavy, streamed through a jagged tear in the hull above him. Daniel took inventory: broken arm, possible concussion, several lacerations, but nothing immediately fatal. The navigation officer hadn't been so lucky. After fashioning a crude splint for his arm, Daniel gathered what supplies remained. The expedition wasn't meant for long-term planetary exploration, just a quick survey mission of an uninhabited system that had shown unusual energy readings. Now those readings made sense. Something about this planet disrupted normal space. Something that hadn't appeared on any scans. Daniel activated his handheld scanner. The air was breathable, slightly higher oxygen content than Earth normal. Temperature, 32 degrees Celsius, uncomfortably warm but survivable. Local flora, unknown, potentially toxic. Fauna, readings indicated multiple life forms nearby, size and threat level undetermined. He gathered the survival kit, water purifier, ration packs for 2 weeks if stretched thin, medical supplies, a plasma cutter that could double as a weapon, and a portable communications array that might, with luck and ingenuity, be modified to reach UNSC space. The ship's main communications were destroyed, and the emergency beacon had failed to deploy. No one knew where he was. No one was coming. One step at a time, Daniel muttered to himself as he stepped through the breach onto alien soil for the first time. The landscape was both familiar and alien. Trees stretched skyward, but their trunks spiraled in impossible patterns, leaves an iridescent purple that seemed to shimmer with their own internal light. The ground beneath his boots was covered in a moss-like substance that responded to his footsteps by briefly glowing blue before fading. Daniel set up a perimeter around the crash site, deploying sensor beacons that would warn of approaching life forms. Night would fall in approximately 4 hours, according to his readings. He needed shelter, fire, and a defensible position. As he worked, the strange forest around him grew more active. Calls and cries echoed between the twisted trees, some like birdsong, others like nothing he'd ever heard. Twice, his sensors alerted him to large creatures passing nearby, but they kept their distance, perhaps wary of the smoking wreckage of his ship. By nightfall, Daniel had converted a portion of the hull into a makeshift shelter. He sat before a small heating unit, reviewing the star charts on his datapad. If his calculations were correct, he'd crashed on the third planet of an unmapped system, at least 17 light-years from the nearest UNSC outpost. As darkness enveloped the alien forest, the vegetation began to glow with bioluminescence, casting the landscape in ethereal blue light. Beautiful, but the beauty did nothing to diminish the gravity of his situation. Alone, with limited supplies, on a world no human had ever set foot upon. Something large moved in the darkness beyond his sensors. Then another. And another. The hunt had begun. Daniel sprinted through the phosphorescent undergrowth, lungs burning with each breath. Behind him, 3 quadrupedal predators pursued, each the size of a tiger but with reptilian features and multiple rows of serrated teeth. Their scales shifted colors to match their surroundings, making them nearly invisible until they moved. For 3 days, he'd survived by staying mobile and using the ship's wreckage as a fallback position. But now he'd ventured too far while searching for water. A fallen tree blocked his path. As Daniel scrambled over it, his injured arm gave way. He tumbled down an embankment, his pack scattering vital supplies across the forest floor. The predator's howls grew closer. Daniel drew his plasma cutter, knowing it wouldn't stop all 3. The lead creature burst through the foliage, its maw opened wide. A blur of motion intercepted it midair. Someone, moved with impossible speed. A blade flashed in the alien moonlight. The predator fell, its throat sliced clean through. The remaining creatures hesitated, then charged. The mysterious figure pivoted, driving a spear into one attacker while dodging the other. Daniel fired his plasma cutter, catching the 3rd predator across its flank. It shrieked and retreated into the undergrowth. In the sudden silence, Daniel finally saw his savior clearly. A woman stood before him, tall and powerfully built, dressed in armor made from materials he didn't recognize. Her skin was bronzed, marked with intricate patterns that seemed to pulse with faint light. Her hair, pulled back in elaborate braids, was the color of burnished copper. She wasn't human, not quite. Her eyes were too large, irises golden and reflective like a cat's. Small ridges traced her forehead and jawline. Yet there was something undeniably human about her stance, her expression. She pointed her spear at him. "I'm not your enemy," Daniel said slowly, setting down his weapon. "Thank you for saving me." The woman tilted her head, studying him. She responded in a language unlike any he'd heard, melodic yet sharp, with clicks and tones his human vocal cords couldn't replicate. Daniel gestured to himself. "Daniel." After a moment's hesitation, she tapped her chest. "Valora." She examined his splinted arm, then gestured for him to follow. Daniel gathered his scattered supplies, weighing his options. The forest was deadly, he was injured, and this warrior woman clearly knew how to survive here. He had little choice but to trust her. They traveled through the night, Valora moving with confident familiarity through the alien terrain. Eventually, they reached a small cave hidden behind a waterfall. Inside, Daniel found evidence of long habitation, tools fashioned from local materials, dried plants hanging from the ceiling, and most surprisingly, technology that seemed far more advanced than anything humans possessed. Valora prepared a paste from local plants and applied it to his injured arm. The pain immediately subsided. She offered him food, a stew containing unfamiliar meat and vegetables. Daniel hesitated, then ate. His scanner indicated no toxins. As they ate, Daniel attempted communication through gestures and simple drawings in the dirt. He learned that Valora had been on this planet for what seemed like several years. She wasn't native to it, but she knew it intimately. When he drew the crash of his ship, Valora's expression darkened. She drew her own craft, then depicted it being attacked by another vessel, one with a distinctive crescent shape. The universal sign of destruction followed, her ship crashing, others of her kind dying. Daniel showed her his communications device. She examined it with keen interest, then retrieved something from her stores, a small crystalline object that pulsed with energy. She mimed combining it with his device, pointing upward to indicate communication with the stars. That night, as Valora stood watch at the cave entrance, Daniel studied her. Who was she? Where had she come from? And what were the hostile forces that had shot down her people? One thing was clear, neither of them belonged on this world, and both wanted to leave. Perhaps together, they could find a way. In the distance, something massive moved through the forest canopy, shaking the treetops. Valora tensed, hand on her weapon. Their eyes met across the dim cave, and understanding passed between them. Tomorrow would bring new dangers, but they would face them together. After a week of cautious coexistence, Daniel and Valora had developed a rudimentary form of communication. Through gestures, drawings, and a growing vocabulary of shared words, they established enough trust to venture beyond the safety of the cave. Valora led Daniel through dense undergrowth toward a mountain range visible on the horizon. She moved with practiced stealth, stopping occasionally to listen or examine trail signs invisible to his untrained eye. Daniel's arm had healed remarkably fast thanks to Valora's medicinal paste, some kind of regenerative compound unknown to Earth science. By midday, they reached a cliff face covered in vegetation. Valora pushed aside the vines to reveal an entrance carved directly into the stone. Ancient symbols flanked the doorway, eerily similar to human writing yet undecipherable. "What is this place?" Daniel asked, knowing she wouldn't understand his words but hoping his tone conveyed curiosity. Valora touched the symbols reverently. "Karjan," she said. "Home." Inside, natural light filtered through strategically placed apertures in the ceiling, illuminating a vast chamber. Daniel gaped at the sight. The ruins weren't primitive, they contained technology far more advanced than anything humanity had achieved. Crystalline computers still hummed with energy. Holographic displays flickered occasionally, showing star maps of unfamiliar constellations. Valora approached a central console and placed her palm against it. The chamber came alive with light. A holographic projection appeared, humanoid figures similar to Valora, dressed in ceremonial attire. They spoke in the same melodic language she used. Daniel watched Valora's face as she viewed the recording. Grief etched deeply into her features. When the projection ended, she turned to him with newfound determination. She pointed to herself, then swept her hand to indicate the empty chamber. "Last," she said in his language. "I last." Through painstaking attempts at communication, Daniel began to understand. Valora's people, the Karjan, had been an advanced civilization that colonized multiple worlds. This planet had been an outpost, a research station studying the unusual gravitational anomalies that had brought down Daniel's ship. The Karjan had encountered another spacefaring race, beings Valora called Vexmora, which Daniel roughly translated as Void Reavers. These creatures had systematically hunted down and destroyed Karjan settlements across the stars. Valora led him deeper into the facility, to a laboratory containing equipment she clearly knew how to operate. She combined Daniel's communications device with Karjan technology, significantly amplifying its power. Then she showed him something that chilled his blood, surveillance footage of a Void Reaver scout ship entering the planet's atmosphere 3 days ago. They were being hunted. Valora opened a weapons vault and equipped herself with devices that looked ceremonial but hummed with deadly energy. She offered Daniel a wrist-mounted device that, when activated, generated an energy shield capable of deflecting projectiles. As darkness fell, they sat among the ancient technology, planning their next move. The communications array needed one more component, a power source pure enough to break through the planetary interference. Such a source existed in the wreckage of Daniel's ship, but retrieving it meant crossing territory the Void Reavers were now searching. That night, in the safety of the ruins, Daniel showed Valora the star charts on his datapad. He pointed to Earth, explaining through crude drawings that his people could help her fight the Void Reavers. Humanity had faced extinction-level threats before and survived through ingenuity and determination. Valora studied the charts intently, then revealed her own map, a complex holographic display showing hundreds of worlds. She highlighted several that pulsed with red light, Karjan worlds already fallen to the Void Reavers. Then she indicated a pattern to their advance, a path that would eventually lead them to human space. Their mission was no longer just about survival or rescue. They needed to warn both their civilizations about the coming threat. As dawn approached, Daniel drifted into uneasy sleep beside the humming machinery. He dreamed of Earth's cities in flames, of Void Reaver ships darkening the skies of his homeworld. He awoke to Valora's hand on his shoulder. She had that hunter's tension about her again. From the entrance of the ruins came a sound like no animal native to this world, the methodical, mechanical movement of something searching. Searching for them. Daniel pressed against the cold stone wall, Valora beside him, as they listened to the methodical movements of the Void Reaver scout. The creature's breathing echoed through the ruins, a rhythmic hissing punctuated by clicks of its armored exoskeleton. "We need to move," Daniel whispered, gesturing toward the back exit Valora had shown him earlier. They crept through the labyrinthine corridors, navigating by the dim bioluminescent fungi growing along the walls. Valora moved with practiced silence, guiding Daniel past pressure-sensitive floor panels that would trigger ancient security systems. The scout was unlike anything Daniel had imagined, 3 meters tall, with multiple jointed limbs and sensory organs arranged in patterns that defied human understanding. Its armor seemed both technological and biological, pulsing with internal energy. They reached a narrow fissure in the rock that led to a network of natural caves beneath the ruins. As they squeezed through, a loose stone clattered down the passage. The sound echoed like a gunshot. The hissing behind them stopped. Then came the heavy footfalls of pursuit. Valora grabbed Daniel's hand and ran. They sprinted through the caves, emerging into a ravine half a kilometer from the ruins. Above them, the twin moons illuminated the landscape in ghostly blue light. "Ship," Valora said, pointing toward the horizon where Daniel's crashed vessel lay. "Need power core." They traveled by night, hiding during daylight hours beneath the dense vegetation. Twice they spotted Void Reaver drones sweeping the canopy with search beams. Once, they narrowly avoided a patrol by submerging themselves in a bog of luminescent algae. On the second night, they reached the crash site, only to find it surrounded by Void Reaver technology. Devices had been planted around the perimeter, scanning and analyzing the human vessel. A larger scout ship hovered nearby, its surface rippling like liquid metal. "Trap," Valora whispered, pulling Daniel into cover. Through his binoculars, Daniel observed the Reavers extracting components from his ship. They were methodical, almost surgical in their precision. Among the parts they'd piled nearby was exactly what they needed, the quantum battery that powered the ship's main systems. "We wait," Valora decided. For hours they observed the aliens' patterns. 3 scouts patrolled the perimeter while a 4th supervised the salvage operation. Every 40 minutes, the patrol patterns shifted, creating a brief window where the battery would be unobserved. Valora removed a small device from her armor and pressed it into Daniel's palm. When he looked confused, she mimed throwing it far away. "Distraction," she explained. Daniel nodded. "I'll get the battery while you create the diversion." The plan was simple but dangerous. When the patrol shifted, Daniel would sprint to the salvage pile while Valora activated the device on the opposite side of the clearing. If all went well, they'd meet back at their hiding spot before the Reavers realized what had happened. When the moment came, Daniel crouched, ready to run. Valora touched his shoulder, a gesture he now understood meant good luck. Then she melted into the darkness. Seconds later, a brilliant flash of light erupted on the far side of the clearing, followed by a sound like tearing metal. The Void Reavers immediately converged on it, weapons drawn. Daniel sprinted toward the salvage pile, heart thundering in his chest. He located the quantum battery, disconnected it from the monitoring devices the Reavers had attached, and secured it in his pack. He was halfway back to cover when something massive dropped from the trees directly in his path, a Void Reaver scout, its sensory organs trained on him. It raised a weapon that crackled with energy. A spear erupted through the creature's chest from behind. Valora materialized from active camouflage, twisting the weapon deeper. The Reaver collapsed, its death cry alerting the others. "Run!" Valora shouted in perfect English, the first complete word of his language she'd mastered. They fled into the forest as energy blasts scorched the ground behind them. The night became a desperate race, with Void Reaver scouts and drones in close pursuit. By dawn, they reached the mountains, the quantum battery secure. But the hunt had only just begun. Dawn broke over the mountain range as Daniel and Valora reached the ancient ruins once more. They'd traveled in a wide arc, using the planet's dense forests to confuse pursuit, but the Void Reavers were adapting to their tactics. "They're learning," Daniel said as he connected the quantum battery to the communications array. "Every encounter, they adjust their strategy." Valora nodded, keeping watch at the entrance. Collective intelligence. One learns, all learn. Her English had improved dramatically over the past 3 days. Whether it was from their constant communication or some technology in the ruins, Daniel couldn't tell. The communications array hummed to life, powered by Earth and Kairjan technology merged into something greater than either. Daniel input the coordinates for the nearest UNSC outpost while Valora added encryption protocols the Void Reavers couldn't break. "How long?" she asked. "To send the message?" "Minutes." "For help to arrive?" "Days, maybe." A shadow passed overhead, the Void Reaver scout ship, making another sweep. They'd found the ruins. "Not days," Valora said grimly. "Hours." They activated the beacon, sending a compressed data packet containing everything they'd learned, the Void Reavers' tactics, weaknesses, and the projected path of their expansion that would eventually threaten Earth. Daniel added a personal message requesting immediate extraction, along with first contact protocols for Valora. As the signal beamed skyward, the first explosion rocked the ruins. "They're trying to dig us out," Daniel realized. Valora led him to a hidden chamber deep within the complex. Inside stood rows of stasis pods, most damaged beyond repair, but one still functional. "Last resort," she explained. "One survives until help arrives." Daniel understood immediately. "No. We both get out or neither does." Another explosion, closer this time. The ruins wouldn't withstand a direct assault for long. Valora pressed a data crystal into his hand, the complete history of her people, their technology, their warnings about the Void Reavers. "If I fall, this continues." They prepared a final stand at the main entrance, using ancient Kairjan weapons and traps. Hours passed as they repelled wave after wave of Reaver scouts. Then, miraculously, Daniel's communicator crackled to life. "Lieutenant Reed, this is UNSC destroyer Thermopylae. We've received your distress call and are entering orbit. Hold position for extraction." Hope surged through Daniel, but the Void Reavers had heard too. Their attacks intensified, becoming reckless, desperate. A strike team from the Thermopylae breached atmosphere in drop pods, engaging the Reaver scout ship. The battle overhead cast strange shadows across the alien landscape as humanity made first contact with the Void Reavers in a display of firepower. As extraction shuttles descended toward the ruins, Valora hesitated. "Come with me," Daniel urged. "My people will help yours fight them." She looked toward the stars. "More of my kind may live. I must find them. Then we'll search together," Daniel promised. "Earth has ships, resources. We face the same enemy now." The choice hung between them as the shuttles landed and UNSC Marines secured a perimeter. The Void Reavers temporarily retreated, but everyone knew they would return in greater numbers. Valora made her decision. She clasped Daniel's forearm in a warrior's grip. Together, she agreed. "First we warn. Then we fight." As they boarded the shuttle, Daniel looked back at the ancient ruins, a testament to a civilization that had faced the same threat now coming for humanity. The knowledge they'd recovered might make the difference between survival and extinction. The shuttle broke atmosphere, carrying them toward the Thermopylae and the stars beyond. Earth would soon know of the Void Reavers. Preparations would begin. And somewhere in the void between worlds, two civilizations would find each other and forge an alliance against the darkness that threatened them both. Daniel looked at Valora as she stared through the viewport at the stars, her golden eyes reflecting pinpoints of light like beacons of hope. This was not an ending, but a beginning.